up from the 36 chambers, we have Project Camelot in the house. Check it out. This is Buzzsaw.
Central Intelligence Agency.
It was described by witnesses as...
Kerry Cassidy made a name for herself starting the Project Camelot forum for interviews with whistleblowers, oddballs, and alike. I mean, it's an amazing library that they've developed over the last 8 years with over 400 hours of interviews. And you would name it, any major whistleblower or alien conspiracy theorist, abductee has been interviewed on their show, and she's here today to talk about her own personal experiences with the extraterrestrial, the paranormal, what she thinks is coming. So, Kerry, thanks for joining us. Project Camelot is a household name for conspiracy theorists, I think, and you've done a tremendous job in 8 years of interviews, and you name it. You've brought people out of the woodwork that many people, for the first time stepping forth, has always been through Project Camelot. So, you've done a great job, and I wanted to, really begin by asking, what does it come from? What was your inspiration to do this show, to just take a camera and start interviewing your contacts and people on these very bizarre X-File subjects?
Well, first of all, I consider it conspiracy fact, not theory.
Conspiracy fact, or just people, you could say anecdotal. It's more anecdotes because a lot
of
times,
it's witness testimony.
Testimony, exactly.
Yeah. And yes, it's all based on human testimony. In other words, live human testimony. I'm a guerrilla filmmaker, so I just basically put a camera in front of somebody's face and get their honest story as they see it, and I ask them the hard questions. I'm known as a somewhat relentless interviewer, and right now I'm in the other seat.
Absolutely.
But I got into this because, that's a long story. But basically, I had my own sort of ET, otherworldly experiences as a child. And then what happened was that I studied Eastern philosophy. I decided I wanted to reach enlightenment, and I connected all my chakras through multiple, samadhi experiences and kundalini, activating kundalini, and so on. And then I kind of continued on that path. Then I went to work in Hollywood for 20 years, and I got frustrated with the glass ceiling and decided to pick up a consumer-grade camcorder and go out and start interviewing the authors and the people that were on the circuit talking about UFOs and so on. I thought it would be a lark, and what happened was that as I started to do it, I found that I was good at it, and I would get a testimony, and I would get people to talk about themselves, and they would reveal things to me. So I then partnered with Bill Ryan. We ended up going to Tintagel in England, and we were both inspired by the Camelot story, the vision of a utopian society where it was horizontal, without hierarchy, and we wanted to get the truth out, so we decided to take my skills as a filmmaker, and I had worked in Hollywood, I'd written screenplays, I'd worked for top producers, and also shopped projects around Hollywood for a good long time. And so we took my skills on that level and his as a webmaster, and we kind of put our skills set together and created Project Camelot. And we haven't looked back. People really went crazy for it in the very beginning and continued to this day, really. We have a huge audience out there, and continue to interview. I mean, I've done probably hundreds of like 500 interviews, but I have a radio show and I interview. We traveled the world basically with the camera, and we were unusual because we were such a small team. We didn't have all the bells and whistles and the right lights and so on, right. But we got the real testimony.
And you've done a great job of sorting that and creating a library. But to begin it, what would how would you describe your early experiences? I mean, would you be able to identify what kind of beings you were in touch with? You know, obviously we've heard the stories of there's the Nordics, there's the reptilians, there's the Greys, there's certain categories of aliens. Do you know what it was that you were contacted by?
Well, I seem to have a link up with the Pleiadians for one thing. And at one point we went to see Billy Meyer in Switzerland, and we couldn't get an appointment to have an interview, so we went on a Sunday in the morning, and just Bill Ryan and myself, and we were sort of hanging out there waiting for the place to open. And he has this big plaque that has a silver star on it, and it's all silver. And I stood in front of it, and he took my picture. You know, we were playing around and taking pictures. And the picture came out silver. And no other picture before or since has ever come out silver that I've taken. We've taken hundreds of thousands because I'm a photographer and we're always doing that kind of thing. And it was George Green, who's one of the people I've interviewed in the past, had the same experience where he had something strange happen when he went on the property where Billy Meyer lived. But the Pleiadians use the silver star, and that's their sort of emblem. So it was just a weird sort of like maybe a little message from the Pleiadians to me.
Wasn't it Aleister Crowley that started the Silver Star Lodge? But
the AA but you know, it's interesting that they
that.
both use, the Illuminati actually uses the silver star, but so do the Pleiadians, and I can't account for that.
Because you think that the Pleiadians are, not think, but generally the Pleiadians are associated with like the Brotherhood of Light, more of like the light beings who are positive.
They're more positive in theory.
You don't think that there's, do you associate the Illuminati entirely with darkness? You don't think that there's any faction or anything that, let's say, that is a higher order of intelligence within the Illuminati that uses both dark and light, let's say?
Oh, sure. You know, there are good people in every sort of organization, and the Illuminati is no exception. But there's a large portion of the Illuminati that are focused on a dark path, and they're also persuaded to be. I believe there are light workers or people that also cross over. They start off on the dark side and then cross over into the light. And so, you know, if you're an official member of the Illuminati, for the most part, you are probably walking a dark path until such time as you make a conscious decision to change. You know, and in essence, you might not be an Illuminati after that. You know, you're something else entirely. But a whistleblower, probably.
Whistleblower, indeed.
But, yeah, so.
Do you, from the number of people you've interviewed, can you recall anyone that you really believe was in the Illuminati, the official organization as such?
Sure.
Like which people?
Well, Leo Zagami, for one. Definitely a member of the Illuminati. And we interviewed him in Norway. He was a whistleblower from the Vatican, you know, from the P2 Lodge, which is, you know, familiar with that.
Freemasonic.
Yeah.
Propaganda Due, right? Apparently P1 was formed by Mazzini, was it, or Garibaldi in the night, or when was P1? Wasn't that?
I don't know. You know, I'm not that familiar with the dark lodges, but I can say that, you know, definitely Leo was from the P2 and still is. And he went back, and they are run by the Black Pope, what's known as the Black Pope.
The Jesuit Pope.
Yeah.
But isn't Francis now both
yeah,
a Black
and so
Pope
now we have black and white.
and white,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Yeah,
Quite
interesting.
Do you think he'll be the last Pope?
Well, I think that's the prophecy, although there may be one more after him if he has a short reign.
Well, that was supposed to be Ratzinger, right? His reign was cut short.
Yeah.
So apparently Francis would be the last in that prophecy.
In theory.
In theory.
Yeah. But yeah.
So as far as the Illuminati goes, because, you know, people always ask me, and frankly, I always say, look, I don't know exactly what it means. You know, I know it exists. I think that there's different meanings for it. Mm-hmm. You know, there's orders of the Illuminati. Even within Masonry, there's, you know, Illuminati orders that I know of, right?
Yeah.
But as far as this global, you know, group, that you think it associates most closely with the Vatican, and for example, in like the Royal, the Scottish Rite, Masonry. Mm-hmm. Would that be your understanding of the Illuminati?
Well, Yes, I mean, they're all levels, right? And so it just depends what you're gonna talk about. I would say that the Vatican heavily is a big influence on what is in essence the Illuminati. But you're talking about a pyramid and a certain level of being close to the top. They may not even consider the Vatican, that may be a step down from a certain level of the Illuminati. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Illuminati, for all intents and purposes, are black magicians. And they are also individuals with an agenda mm-hmm. for planet Earth. And most of if you've ever studied Aleister Crowley, then you know the philosophy, the occult philosophy that they follow. Mm-hmm. But in my view, being a magician is not necessarily a dark thing. There can be light magicians and dark magicians. Right. So it just depends which you choose, which path, again, you choose. Right. And I fully believe that actually Project Camelot has existed this long because the powers that be, we have friends in high places, so to speak. And so there will be members that are, in essence, Illuminati, hidden members of the Illuminati, ones that are keeping a low profile even among their membership, that will be supporting us. And I've gotten letters from various people who've contacted me that are, I would say, they're Masons, they're Freemasons, they're mm-hmm.
Templars,
and the Templars are not all negative either.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I think that's a big misconception that, we try on shows like this, we try to have conversation because the point is, it's not that all Freemasons are bad. It's not like an evil boogeyman group. Because yes, I think that they associate with what people would call jinns, spirits, entities, alien, right? Yeah. But again, they're not all bad entities, right? We, just because, from a Christian, maybe from a hardcore Christian point of view, anything that's not an angel is a demon, right? And yet, as we know historically speaking, daemons are what inspired Socrates. I mean, it's like part of the personal genie or genius. So there are these spirits or entities that are neither angelic nor evil, demonic, that people interact with and associate with.
Right. Well, I would consider, I don't look at the world as just angels and demons. I believe that there are lots of different kinds of beings. Some incarnate into bodies, and some of the bodies are all different levels of light or dark. And so I'm not, and also it's important to realize that angels are not typically angelic in the sense that people think they are. That's a misconception. As far as I'm concerned, the so-called halo that you see around beings of light is really more about activated Kundalini energy, and it's a misunderstanding to think of that person as being therefore angelic. Mm-hmm.
But that's more positive, right? If you have a halo, that means you're ascended to
not
a higher
necessarily
level.
Because you can the dark side knows that they can activate the Kundalini and have a dark agenda, so that's where you get a dark magician.
Interesting. So they still have they still have activated the Kundalini,
oh, absolutely.
but they would have a darker halo.
Yes. Now they will have trouble with some of their chakras. The chakras will not all be pure and clear. And they will have emphasized certain chakras over others, like the mental chakra as opposed to the heart chakra.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly.
So we'll have an underdeveloped heart chakra.
And that's what we need, the lion heart, the Christ consciousness is from the heart. So as far as the bloodlines are concerned, I mean, there is obviously this issue of the Illuminati bloodlines and an awareness of families who want to preserve a bloodline, or let's say they continue to intermarry. What does the blood have to do with that, as far as incarnation purposes? Do you know?
Well, what I say is there are at least, we humans are a hybrid race, and so we're made up of 12 or more ET races. They're genetics. They're all combined in us in different amounts. And this is where you get, in essence, what humans are is boots on the ground, is what I call them. And that goes for the Illuminati as well. And they tend to have more reptilian genes, at least a good portion of them. And the reptilian agenda is not always negative, so it's important to understand that some reptilians, the Shakars, for example, are the supposed royalty of the reptilian class, the Draco. And then there are the reptilians, which are more like snake type reptilians. There are many, many reptilian races, and not all are negative, or service to self, as we say.
Right.
There are at least two, though, that are service to self that want to take over. Their agenda is to take over the earth, to take it back from humans. And they feel that they were here first, at least one of those races. And there's evidence that at least one of the races comes from Aldebaran, and this is who the Nazis were in communication with.
I see. So two different reptilian races initially here, and the ones that the Nazis were communicating with were from Aldebaran, but ultimately the Nazis haven't died out. I mean, that's one of the interesting things I think that people have to understand is that a lot of the Illuminati tends to be within the, like, how do you say, within the hierarchy, does seem to be operating under the influence of Nazi type of characters, neo-Nazis, or the bloodlines that relates to the hierarchy of the Nazis. Is that what you've seen here, like as far as the United States is concerned even?
Yeah, I mean, well, this is where, I bring in my whistleblowers. So first of all, there's, the Jim Mars, Joseph Farrell, talking about the Fourth Reich, which is the name of a book that Jim Mars has written. And it's all about how the United States brought the Nazi scientists over in paperclip, and that they started the secret space program. And the part that is in the general public is, of course, Los Alamos, and the nuclear bombs and so on and so forth. But it went much far beyond that, involved building UFOs, going interplanetary, and so on. So we're really talking about a highly developed secret space program that probably started around the time in the 1940s. And there's even evidence that, for example, the Nazis themselves may have been influenced by Tesla and Tesla technology, so that a lot of people think that the Nazis, being in contact with this race from Aldebaran, which was through these women psychics,
the Vril,
that were getting this information. But there's also evidence that they may have been, there was a dialogue, in other words, and the Bushes were financing the Nazis from early on, from before they became, what was in essence the Third Reich, I guess you might call it.
But again, this goes back to genetics and why the interest in racial theory, because as we know, the Bush-Harriman clan were very heavily involved in the early genetics programs here that actually inspired Hitler, right? The first eugenics conferences were held in the United States.
Yeah, exactly. So, but again, there's a faction of those scientists that went to Russia. There's a faction that went to Argentina, and they have underground bases at this point. And Werner von Braun, of course, is one of the more well-known Nazi paperclip scientists who I think virtually ran the secret space program for a very long time in the early days. And I believe that he knew a great deal more than he revealed. He seems to have a very checkered past, and I don't know if you've ever spoken to Carol Rosin, who worked with him and for him, I believe. She knew him quite well. However, I also think that perhaps either she doesn't know his true past or she doesn't reveal it. And, this is the type of thing where it's all about national security of this country, what level the secret space program really is at.
Right.
And I've got whistleblowers such as Jake Simpson that says they're about 10,000 years in advance of what we're living in now.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, my mind was boggled by the realization that the NSA had computers that were operating in 1965 at the level that our computers, the public had in 2000, were operating at. So
right.
What we got in 2000 was what the secret government had in 65.
Absolutely.
How about that? Right.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And when you know that things about this, I mean, I'm pretty deep into the secret space program, as you can appreciate. And that's where most of my whistleblowers are giving us testimony, even behind the scenes. And let me say that whistleblowers at this time have really sort of quieted down. I think that what has gone on with Edward Snowden and with Julian Assange has sort of scared them to some degree, where a lot of them are going to ground, a lot of them are not wanting to go before the camera. Now, I'm hoping that'll turn around with shows like yours, which will bring more attention on an international level, to where people realize that and our policy at Camelot has been the best place to hide is out in the open. And so if you can get more famous as a whistleblower, and I'm saying this to the whistleblowers out there, you know, it is your job, it is your duty to report to humanity what's really going on. Because our humanity is basically experiencing a split. There's a rogue civilization that's become the secret space program, and that is going off planet, and that is going interstellar, creating bases on places like moons of Saturn and Jupiter. Arthur C. Clarke wrote about this. He was a person who was very well read into the secret space program even when he was alive. And I think it inspired a lot of his science fiction.
Well, maybe Kubrick knew something about it too from working with him on 2001 and potentially doing the documented moon landing as opposed to the real one.
Yes, and I, as far as I'm concerned, and based on our whistleblowers, again, such as Henry Deacon, who came out under his own name, Arthur Neumann, later, we did go to the moon. So it's not that we didn't go to the moon, but they also filmed something so that they would have a record, because they knew that what they would encounter there, and they didn't know if they could get footage.
They couldn't have revealed possibly what was really on the moon, because
yes, all the beings that are on the moon, and you know, I think that the moon is also a heavy-duty gray base, and that gets into the grays and what they're doing here, and the whole abductions and so on.
Mm-hmm. How do you not get lost with all the whistleblowers you deal with? I mean, how do you not, in a sense, just your head starts to swim, because oftentimes stories can contradict each other, and you know, you get one bad seed in the bucket, and all of a sudden you're not quite sure what to believe anymore.
Well, from my point of view, first of all, you know, this is not just like a hobby. We got into this very seriously for 8 years, and I've done it for 8 years. Bill was my partner for the first 4, and then he's gone off and done his own thing since then. So I carried on, and when you're into this world, you're into it 24/7. You know, a story can come at any time. And as an investigative journalist, I'm investigating. I'm always open to whatever's coming to me. And with the internet being what it is, Facebook, I mean, I've got, 5,000 Facebook friends on all my different pages, which, what is that, 15,000 or more. And then on top of it, I've got 100,000, close to 100,000 YouTube, people and subscribers. And we've got, millions of people that have seen our videos around the world and all of this. So I have people contacting me constantly. Mm-hmm. I get people that are absolutely out of their minds, and I get people that are in between, and then I get people that are really have something to say, and they know what they're talking about.
Right.
And being able to tell the difference is, it's not easy, but first of all, I'm an intuitive, so that helps me in my work and always has, and it's paid off very well, let me say. The other thing is that, I studied this sector before I got into it, so I really went in all directions. I studied Eastern philosophy, I studied the occult,
right.
So I had a really good foundation.
In knowledge, I mean,
yeah,
exactly.
And so you can't really pull the wool over my eyes so easily. Now, that's not to say that our whistleblowers do they always tell the truth, because people always want to know that. And what I say is that sometimes they will give you disinfo just to save their own lives. Because you must understand that if somebody is whistleblowing, they know full well that they could be, shot in the head tomorrow. And the surveillance society that we live in is so intense and so complete and so pervasive, in fact, way beyond what Edward Snowden has released so far. Which Camelot had, we knew this, 1 year into Camelot. And this is now, 8 years later. I assure you that our whistleblowers had clued us into all of that, the surveillance that's going on, which involves quantum computers and scalar weaponry and you name it. Mm-hmm. So they did not lose plane 370, by the way. I mean, they know where it is. This is the kind of thing that goes on, but it has to do with a war, a secret war that's being fought between various factions of humans and ETs. And some of our military is aligned with different groups of ETs. Some of the Brits are involved with another group, the Russians with another group, the Chinese with another group. So it's a huge sort of massive game that's being played right now.
Do you know roughly what the factions look like?
Yeah, I do. I don't know exactly, I don't know all the ET groups because there are many of them visiting Earth right now. We know some of what you call the usual suspects, right? But recently I interviewed Captain Mark Richards, and I actually went to interview him in prison. He's in Vacaville. He's been there for over 30 years. He was framed for murder. He was a captain in the Navy, and his father was also, a military man. I think his father was, I can't remember whether it was the Air Force, the Army, but they invaded Dulce, the underground base Dulce, and rescued some humans that were being experimented on there. They were part of a raid. What I'm saying about Mark Richards is that he's a person who said that there are at least 2 races of reptilian species that are here that are hostile, that do want to take over the Earth. And the Greys, several of the races, I would say, a few of the races of Greys are fully reptilian, and they report to this group of reptilians. But that there is a group called the Raptors, which Mark Richards talks lots about and has had constant interaction with when he was in the secret space program. And it's really interesting because that group never hits the news. Nobody ever talks about raptors. Right. You know what I mean?
Talking like dinosaurs? I mean, do they have any resemblance to the dinosaur raptors, or just more aggressive? I
think they do, actually. Yeah. Velociraptors or something like that. I'm not sure exactly how they look. I mean, he was describing, I went to this prison and I interviewed him for 2 hours straight, and I sat closer than I'm sitting to you right now and just peppered him with questions nonstop, as you can appreciate. Because a guy with this kind of knowledge, you just don't want to let him go, and I only had limited time. I couldn't take notes. I couldn't have a tape recorder, nothing. They wouldn't allow anything in the prison. But I just remembered all of it, and then I have this video I called Total Recall, because I walked out of the prison and we turned on the tape recorder and we just went, and I just, regurgitated basically everything I heard.
But so it was the ultimate, I mean, for people that have to understand, we are living amongst aliens at all times, basically. It's like Men in Black. They look human, but they're not.
Right.
That's the idea.
Yes, and apparently Men in Black is quite accurate. I mean, what you've got is a secret space program and a secret government that is using the media, especially the entertainment industry, to release all of this information. And the television shows you're watching right now they're releasing truth all the time. But they put it in the guise of fiction. Right. And this is actually why I got into Hollywood. I wanted to make sci-fi blockbusters. That was what I really wanted to do. Yeah. But when I reached the ceiling and I couldn't get anywhere, I just, decided to go off and do documentaries. And so I'm actually on my way back to make feature films. Right. Based on all the incredible information that we've gotten, these incredible testimonies.
But in Hollywood, did you ever come across the secret side of it, let's say? Because obviously we know there's a history of relationship between Wall Street and Hollywood, between the military and Hollywood, and the Illuminati, you name it. I mean, obviously it's a beacon of media, so of course there's going to be an influence and power structure as far as what gets projected into the minds of people. Did you ever confront any of these factors?
Yes.
I mean, yeah.
And I had direct experience, because Project Camelot, we were involved in a True TV pilot, and it was based around what I do in Project Camelot, Bill Ryan and myself. And the whole, we went out, we interviewed witnesses. It was shot on the road, and we had some of our top witnesses in the show, and they shot it. It was supposed to be, I think it was an hour or 2 hour pilot. I think an hour. And it was actually very good. It's on YouTube, so you can watch it. It's also on our website. They didn't go to series, but what happened during the shooting of the pilot is one of our witnesses, who is also a CIA agent, asset, whatever you want to call him, Gordon Novell, who's since passed on. He's no longer here. No, well,
knowing Gordon Novell, I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, well, you knew him?
No, I
okay.
just know the story. This guy pops up all over the place in every conspiracy you can name.
Well, I mean, I got to know him pretty well, and he actually called me up during the shooting. He's in the TV show as well. We interview him on screen, so you can see him if you're not familiar with him. But he's like he kind of had this persona that was a little like a 1940s gangster in the way he acts. And he was part of all kinds of clandestine operations, part of the Nixon administration, and even had said to be possibly involved in the Kennedy assassination, although he always denied it. But he called me up and he said, I'm going to admit to you that I am a CIA agent, and they want to make an offer to your producer, that if the producer will make a deal with them, that your show will go to series and we will be on board with it. So as long as you allow that, you guys can go right ahead. So I connected him with my producer, and the producer basically said, no way. And what happened? We shot the pilot, they put it in the can, they put it on the shelf for two years. True TV wouldn't even release it. When they did release it finally, they had no advertising whatsoever. They didn't notify us, they didn't notify the producer or the director. They just sort of slipped it out there. Right. But someone had seen their schedule, you know, because they put it out there a week ahead of time that week, and they notified us. So we did this like media blitz, letting people know that it was going to be screened, and you know, it did all right in the ratings as a result. But yeah, it was killed.
Right. Well, it reminds me of last season of Conspiracy Theory on True TV.
There you go, and actually, wasn't it Fred Bell that died right after a series?
He died about a day after meeting with Jesse and telling Jesse personally that he had encountered gray aliens at underground bases, off camera. But
right.
he had told them some things and basically said, my CIA handler wouldn't like if I told you this.
There you
but,
go.
You know, yes, I've definitely seen the grays. Not sure about the reptilians. He hadn't experienced any reptilians, but confirmed at least a couple of gray encounters. And again, you hear this from people who are inside, and there's no benefit to them to be admitting these things unless that's their real experience.
Yeah.
Right. But anything else as far as Hollywood was concerned that really struck you, or you want to review?
Let's see. There was another encounter that I had, which was basically I was contacted by some very high level. I'm not going to use any names here because, you know, my sympathies are with these particular producers. They meant well, and they're very high level, and very well known. If I said one of their names, you know, everyone would know the name. And they were very interested in Camelot and what we did, and they came across one of our interviews with Dan Burish, and they wanted to make a movie of it. And we went down the road a certain distance, and then they got a phone call, and they were basically told to drop it. And you know, so one of the producers came and told me. But I also was told that there was a very okay, I have to be careful here because I don't want to. I want to reveal a certain amount. There is a certain faction of Hollywood that is high-level entertainers that are very, very monitored by the Illuminati. And there's a lot of black magic going down in Hollywood, a lot of Satanism, as
we got a taste of it at the Oscars this year. I don't know. I asked people all the time, did you notice the fact that the A in the Oscar was a giant pyramid with the Oscar statue in the middle? And they did a Wizard of Oz ceremony with Whoopi Goldberg dressed as a first-degree Mason coming on stage to present it.
Sure.
And it's like people don't realize it, but it was completely out there in the open for them.
Well, they're selling a lot of vampirism and also Katy Perry, of course, in her. I think that was part of the Oscars or whatever it was.
Probably one of the music ceremonies, Grammys or something.
But at any rate, yeah, you know, all the symbolism is there. They're kind of selling Satanism right now in Hollywood. It's wild and quite bizarre, but. Yeah, so anyway, what I was saying was that a certain group is very, and it has to do with the music industry as well, heavy duty, you know, sort of control of the music industry and the players and the stars. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, and based on whistleblower information as well, Michael Jackson was murdered, Whitney Houston was murdered. These people were all victims of Satanism in Hollywood.
So as far as what you're saying, as far as the influence for the entertainers, was there something else you were getting at with that?
Well, just that this particular group is being, you know, they're coerced, shall we say? In other words, they don't have the freedom well, let me just say that that black performers and black producers and anyone in that area is very coerced by this Illuminati group, more so than the white side. And but they both are. So it's not like either one escapes it so much as the coercion is much stronger in the music industry over the black performers.
Yeah. Well, this year, 12 Years a Slave was the big winner, but I felt like Brad Pitt was the bigger winner. So if you were going to say we're at this turning point now, post 2012, no major cataclysm occurred. This is not the end of the world. Do we see any light at the end of the tunnel? Do we see any dawn on the horizon? Is there anything positive coming from all these from all these this darkness that we've experienced, let's say, and the control of the Illuminati of the last few thousand years?
Yes, because as far as I'm concerned, people like you and I, and there are many out there doing the same kind of job. In other words, we're waking people up. And as the consciousness rises on planet Earth, this is the real sort of enemy of the Illuminati and the controllers, so to speak. We're basically breaking the bonds of us as slaves here on the planet. In other words, working 9-to-5 jobs. I mean, you can appreciate, I just interviewed M.T. Kesh, and he's an Iranian physicist, nuclear engineer, who then became a free energy plasma physicist, and has gone down that road quite far, and created this thing called the Kesh Foundation. First was working, in all areas, but he moved from Iran to Belgium, and they created devices and so on. And then apparently the Belgian government turned against them and asked them to leave the country. And then he had to go to Italy, and he's been threatened again. So I just did a radio show. Actually, it was a live stream, live broadcast with him. He was on audio. I was on video. He didn't have the video set up. But the bottom line is they took down our website that night. He's now on the run. He has been threatened. And again, it's a Satanist. They want to torture his family right in front of him. They're trying to shut him up. But what he has is free energy, and so the way to do away with gasoline, oil, all of this nonsense that they use.
That's the dollar itself. The dollar system is based on petrol. It's based
there you
on
go.
The purchase of oil and natural gas pipelines. I mean, Ukraine is about natural gas pipelines. Afghanistan. I mean, you name it. All these conflicts.
Yeah, all the wars.
Oil and natural gas.
Yeah, and actually, people are confused over the wars because they see that this oil idea is really sort of old and out of date. But the bottom line is, a lot of times we go into countries to take control of the stargates. It's much more about the stargates and the secret space affiliated types of things, ancient sites that have powerful energies. None of this is revealed to the general public, but it's really crucial information. And Iraq is one of those places. I mean, we took down Iraq because of the Stargate there, not because of the oil.
But why aren't we still there then? What do
we
get
are.
from it?
We're absolutely there, and we're there underground. And they have complete control of the Stargate in Iraq, and they'll never let it go. They want to go into Syria for a similar reason, from what I understand, and Iran as well. But Iran is not going to allow that to happen. And so I think they have a sort of important opponent to that sort of venture here on planet Earth. I mean, they are trying to control who comes in, what races visit, and who don't. Their Solar Warden is the name of an interstellar space fleet that we have that patrols the solar system. And this is all information from my whistleblowers.
Right.
So.
But Solar Warden would be run by the reptilian, like the negative faction?
The secret space program, by and large, is run by the Illuminati and the negative reptilian faction, yes. However, I think within the secret space program, which is where I get some of my whistleblowers, you're going to have someone who as a soul decides to work on the dark side for a certain period of time, and then feels that they have they owe a debt to humanity, and they decide to come forward and reveal to the rest of humanity what's really going on. And that's what's really important, is that they can't stop that. So these are the signs of hope. A whistleblower is your best insurance that you're going to get the truth about what's really going on.
Yeah.
It's not documents, because documents can always be faked.
Right. Right. Well, let's hope that the whistleblowers aren't going to be scared off, but like you said, by what's going on with Snowden.
Right.
And the overall fact that we are living constantly, right now, we're in a state of national emergency again, right? It's because of the Ukraine situation. And it literally, it's like since post 9/11, we're living in a world of goose-stepping and, in the Nazi Reich. I mean, it's this level of
That's right.
paranoia, fear, everyone get in line. You can't criticize the government. You can't criticize, our policies around the world. And I think we should look to Snowden as a hero, whether or not he was working with CIA auspices or any kind of factions that were supporting his move. At the end of the day, it's heroic that he stepped forward. The same way that Manning leaked the information that Assange has done.
Yeah.
All these guys are heroic for what they've done. Let's look to them as examples. We want more people like that to leak, because ultimately the system can break down if enough people basically jump ship, or they throw the captain overboard.
Yeah, I mean, whistleblowers are, in essence, canaries in a coal mine. They're warning us that this thing is imploding. And Bradley Manning, I mean, I just want to say that person, he's really sacrificed himself for the good of humanity, to get the truth out. And he's been raked over the coals, thrown into the brig, and I guess we won't hear from him again. Doesn't look like. But, I mean, one of my whistleblowers, Gary McKinnon, is another example of that. Now, he did get off. He, basically had a great defense and was able to get out of the what they wanted to do, which is to extradite him from the UK to America. And his mother was completely paranoid that he would end up in Guantanamo and never be heard from again, with good reason, sad to say. I mean, it's really unfortunate, but the United States has become the Fourth Reich for all intents and purposes. And a lot of people, I want to say, if anyone watches this internationally and what I'm saying actually gets out there, I want to say that, Americans are not as dumb as people think they are. And, you're a perfect example.
Unfortunately, the mainstream media is as dumb as they think they are. That's another thing. Or willing dupes, let's say.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
So people can check out Project Camelot on YouTube, obviously.
Yeah, and projectcamelot.org is our URL.
And then your radio
and on
program.
Facebook.
And your radio program is
Friday nights, 7 to 9 p.m.
Revolution
Pacific
Radio.
time.
Revolution Radio.
Yeah.
Right. Very cool. Well, thanks for coming on. Obviously we could talk for hours, but I think we can let it to the audience to go and check out the archive and the library that you have available.
Thank
because, it's a tremendous resource. So thank you for the work that you've done.
You're welcome.
And continue to do.
Thank you.
There you have it, folks. Another fascinating episode. I'm sure some of these ideas might seem like Star Trek, but I tend to believe that the reality that we see is nothing like the reality that truly exists. So this is Sean Stone reminding you that you are the revolution.